was born in Chicago in a neighborhood called La Villita, Little Village, and it is predominantly a Mexican neighborhood now. My parents come from Mexico. My parents had a restaurant in Chicago, and my father met somebody who owned a restaurant in Melrose, Minnesota. My father explained to him that he wanted to move out of the city, that the city was just charging too many taxes and a lot of his profit went just back to the city. So my parents came and they checked it out and they liked it, and they kept the restaurant in Chicago for a few months. My siblings and I ran it. At that time, I was working 2 jobs and going to school, and I was wondering, how am I gonna afford this? My mother called me and she said, why don't you look at the colleges and universities here in Minnesota? They're a lot more affordable. And I was like, okay. And I started looking up colleges and universities on the internet, and I found one. And when my grandmother moved out here, I moved out here with her. I think that when you grow up in a neighborhood where everybody or most of the people look like you and talk like you and grew up with familiar upbringings, and you move to a small town in central Minnesota and there is a culture shock and there is a sense of loss of self-identity in that process. There was a woman at my parents' restaurant who asked me, what part of Mexico are you from? And I answered her, I'm an American. And she asked me again, well, what part of Mexico are you from? And this happened 3 times, and I was like, no, I'm an American. I was born in Cook County Hospital. And she says to me, oh, you just want to be white so bad. And I looked at her and I was like, wait, you connect being white with being American? I then transferred to St. Cloud State University, where I met a very great professor who has now passed away, who introduced me to Chicano studies. That's where I found my passion in ethnic studies, and I took anthropology as well. When I first came to school, I didn't even know what anthropology was. I would have never thought that would have been one of my focuses. So right now I have 2 jobs. I'm working at the Central Minnesota Sexual Assault Center, providing trauma-informed education to victims and survivors of sexual assault, as well as support. I'm also a Building Futures Youth Coordinator for Catholic Charities, which works with Belle Claire Estates. It is a trailer park where a lot of the living conditions are below poverty level. And what I'm currently doing for summer programming is taking children to community ed classes that they normally would not be exposed to if the programming would not be there. What I think I contribute to my community is with community outreach and education. I consider my community to be any group that has been oppressed or marginalized in any way. So it's a broader sense of community that I perceive to be my own. I'm a single mom, and I have 1 daughter, Michelle Melendez, and she's 6.5 years old now. I'm also worried about how my daughter will self-identify because of the experience that she's gonna have growing up. Where I grew up with a lot of Chicanas, she's not. So how will she self-identify through that process is definitely one of my concerns.